Oh. It's a great day on the internet, everybody. Welcome to Assemble. I'm Matt. How you doing? It's Friday. We did it. I'm all very excited this week. I got the kids back in school. Both of the monsters are gone. They're out of the house for a bit. I get to catch up on some games. Oh, and I get to spend some time with my wife. It's all very sophisticated. I'm all very excited. Mostly for the free time that I kind of get the hour or two throughout the day. And yes, I did pre-order my Xbox. And yes, I am oh so screwed. But we'll see what happens in November. They haven't taken my money yet, right? So I got a month, right? I'm not dead yet. I did try to pre-order the PS5 this morning. Because I'm in the Canadian boy. What's up? That did not go well. I was clicking the button profusely and aggressively all morning. I got nothing. So we'll have to wait to see if I get that or if I'm just gonna wait. I still haven't decided if I'm gonna get the PS5 for now or if I'm gonna wait until the new year. Anyways, totally off topic. What I want to talk today with you guys is going to be X-Men. And more specifically, I want to talk about the X-Men movie franchise. Now, I do want to leave out the Deadpool movies in this conversation because I really want to hone in on the X-Men movies, the traditional ones. Yes, we have Colossus in Deadpool movies, but I really just want to talk about that kind of core franchise that we've seen evolve over the last 20 years now, actually. And now that we've seen it kind of mature and grow to this giant moment where it's out of Fox's hands, into the hands of Marvel, into the hands for the MCU. That part I'm very excited about. But I wanted to ask and talk to you guys about what are some of the favorite things about the X-Men movies, and obviously some of the things that really didn't work for us. I asked a lot of you guys out on Twitter. Thank you so much for engaging with us. I did want to just be able to reach out and see what did you think, and the overall impressions that I got regarding the X-Men movies was that, you know, Logan is probably the top ranked fan favorite Wolverine movie, X-Men movie out of, you know, the whole catalog that we have. And what is impressive though about the X-Men franchise as a whole is how many movies we actually got. What it shows is that over the course of several years, 20 years since the original one debuted, they are relatively successful. They're summer blockbuster movies. People hear about a new X-Men movie, it's gonna do something. Now, the Dark Phoenix didn't do anything. The Apocalypse movie really was all over the place. I thought it had some potential in there. The Psylocke was in there. Matt got all excited about that, but it didn't really evolve into what it could have been, and definitely could have been for Apocalypse, that type of character. But I want you guys to think back also about when we first got the exposure and heard about the X-Men movies coming to screens. The original X-Men movie, X-Men #1, came out in July of 2000. This is a long time ago now. For some of you that might be watching, you may have not seen these movies, the first original trilogy, and you may have only been experienced to like Days of Future Past and the newer ones that actually came out where you have an entirely new crop of actors outside of like Hugh Jackman. But guys, if you were like me and the original movie came out, like we were still getting hints and discussions of this movie in like Wizard magazines and stuff of like who the cast was going to be. Hugh Jackman was like totally unknown at that point. So you'd see pictures of the guy of how he was going to be portraying Wolverine, because that was probably the main thing, was who was going to play Wolverine. And you started seeing the cast come together and it really felt like it was going to click. And that original movie, as campy and, it's got a lot of holes in it, it does a good job in itself of trying to tell a story between Rogue and Wolverine and introducing those characters into a universe. And this is predating MCU. This is like right around when we only had Batman movies, Spider-Man, Raimi, and the X-Men. And with these original movies, we didn't have a ton of exposure to like a larger cast of characters and how to do it properly and effectively like we have now seen in the MCU films. Because I think that's what we all do now, right? Is we all just look at MCU and say, well, X-Men should have done that. And with the newer X-Men movies, I definitely agree that they could have done more, but they created so many different timelines and jumps in leaps in logic and time travel and going into the past and fixing everything else in the future. They had to do so much to kind of right the course. And I give them a little bit of credit that they did try. And when we look at those original movies when they came out, there's goods and bads. But I think what really hurt us as fans of the originals is that what we wanted, and at least for what I wanted out of the original X-Men movies, was going to be, I wanted that 90s adaptation of X-Men. And I know that they're trying to go for, well, you can't put them in the blues and the yellows and Storm's full white costume, like it doesn't work on screen. So they went with a darker approach to the whole thing, and it does work, but we still got the mutant elements, and that's cool. And Wolverine is obviously the main character throughout, the entire franchise. He's the cornerstone of it. But I really would have liked them to try to take a stab at doing those costumes, and even in the later movies, I feel like they could have even gone down that path. And what I think of is like when Wolverine goes in for Days of the Future Past and he travels in time, that's when I would have liked to see him, go back and having the yellow costume there and him having to wear it. Maybe even not even the mask, but maybe just having to put on the whole gear. It would have been cool to see. And we got the introductions of other characters like Mystique that they used throughout the movies. And as time went on, we see the relationship between Xavier and Magneto really grow. They become, huge enemies, which is really great. And again, it's a very good story arc that they're trying to tell, especially with Magneto and his childhood and Magneto's true motivations for wanting a different life for mutants, and contrasting that with what Xavier's vision is too. I think that those elements throughout the course of all these films were really well done. But like a lot of you, what I had problems with were like, X-Men 3, jumbling through timelines too much, not allowing characters to breathe, going back to the well with too many plot points, not allowing other characters to develop enough, killing off Cyclops, which I thought was just a whole mess in itself, really trying to shoehorn in and trying to get to the Dark Phoenix. While in the comic books, and even in the 90s cartoon, that Dark Phoenix storyline is really cool. It's really, really cool. And they just fumbled the whole thing. And I feel like there was also just too much of trying to talk about Wolverine's past and constantly going back to that. It's like, we get it, but like, what else are we gonna do? Why can't we get Wolverine with a really cool protagonist like Sabretooth? And they did that in the first one, but it wasn't Sabretooth the way we wanted it. And again, it was always throughout the course of these films, I feel like there was always these things where I'm like, man, they could have just done it this way. Why don't they just follow more of the comics, give people what they want? That's where I think Marvel really shines, is that they look at the stories, they look at Infinity War, they look at the costumes and the characters and the relationships, and they took so many years to really get it to kind of come and build to this endpoint. And you totally could have done the same thing with X-Men over the years, but unfortunately we didn't get that. And some cool things that we obviously got is like, we get the introduction of the Sentinels, we get to see them in Days of Future Past. When they go back and they first introduce them, like, you get to see that origin in there, and those things are cool to see to come to life. And seeing Magneto on the screen to come to life for the first time, Wolverine pulling out the claws on screen, those are huge moments for us as kids because we didn't get that exposure before that. And what's cool, guys, is that we're at a point now where we look at when can we get like a standalone Wolverine movie, and to have that conversation as a real dialogue. And I do know that we have a Logan movie and it was rated R and it just absolutely crushes its own story. Yeah, it's tied into the movies, but it is its own thing with X-23, and there's a lot going on in there. And I think they could do it again and create a branch off into another standalone Wolverine movie with a new Wolverine, a younger one, and go down that path. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Who would you like to see as a Wolverine? And do you think you would want to see that as its own like part 1, 2, and 3 films and do a whole story arc? Because we got that with Logan. There's really fantastic stuff in there. Do you think they could do even more? And taking questions and discussion points from the community, guys, thank you so much for chatting with us on Twitter. Go to assemble_show on Twitter so you can join the conversation with us there. But like Matt Ferguson writes to the show and just says, like, I've always said that the X-Men movies have always seemed like they were made by people who've never seen any of the previous films. And the small details that would make this one solid universe are always missing or they're wrong. And Matt, I really agree with you because I've always had the same problem where I'm like, I don't get it. I don't get why the people that are writing, directing, doing the costume designs, they're not looking at the comics. They give them just like the core abilities, like Wolverine's claws, Cyclops blaster, Iceman has freeze, and they just put them in their black leathery suits and that's it. And it's too simple and it doesn't define them as their own characters. And it always felt to me, even as a young kid, Matt, where I was like, man, they really didn't like watch any of this. They pulled off the Magneto Xavier stuff. I mean, that was fine, but they didn't go any deeper, and they've ignored like just years of amazing comic book storylines that they could easily have just jumped into. But instead we have to have this huge arc of Magneto and Xavier back and forth for multiple films where I don't feel like I ever really got the payoff I was looking for. And you get to see things like they bring in the Brotherhood a little bit in the first one, but it doesn't evolve. And again, it was always this kind of like drop in of characters as the movies went by and the franchise grew, and you're like, okay, we got Colossus. And I remember hearing about Colossus entering into the X-Men franchise thinking that's gonna be awesome. Iceman's gonna be there too, and that's cool. But they're like background characters, so they have cool fight scene moments like the odd ones, and X-Men 2 was good. That was a much better X-Men film. And arguably it's some of people's favorites going like throughout the span of the franchise. So there's cool moments and things that they do with it, but man, you just don't get like this giant fight with Magneto ever. That really makes you just go wow, or big scale battles that we could have used, or fighting Apocalypse. There's so much we could have done, and I feel like, Matt, like we didn't get that. Nick also writes in, Shotgun McPain, how are you, sir? It says like the X-Men movies are one of those series that have definitive best and worst movie. Logan is the best, and X-Men Origins is the worst. Perfectly balanced as all things should be. Thanos. Well done. Yeah, Nick, I'm with you. It's interesting for a movie franchise to be able to go from such extremes, isn't it? Where we lose this consistency and there's directors that are brought in and then exit, and like the scripts and the stories get changed so much. And there's way more going on than I would ever understand with making a film, let alone a script for a movie. But I just feel like if you had passion behind the characters, the franchise itself of X-Men, you treat it with respect, and you can just pick up any comic series and work with it. If you want to do the time travel stuff, that's amazing. Look at the damn animated series. We got Bishop and Cable and Professor X, and we've got everything into like even Age of Apocalypse they dabbled into, where it's Storm and Wolverine have a relationship together. You could have done any of those things. You could have done the X-Men cartoon Night of the Sentinel storyline with Jubilee as what was the rogue character essentially in X-Men 1. You could have done that, but we also need to keep in mind too of where were we in terms of tech. We look at things like where we have the MCU films that are so many years ahead, and green screen technology and all of the technology and After Effects and everything they can do with CGI now. We didn't really have that back then. So I think you're getting more practical effects when it comes into the original X-Men movies, but it doesn't really excuse it, right, Nick? Where you can have an amazing movie like Logan given in the right hands of the right director and team, and then you get movies like X-Men Origins that are the complete opposite. And like X-Men Apocalypse, I again thought interesting cast, and okay, we're going back into this. We got like one fight scene towards the end, there's too much of the story building of just trying to get to this one little fight, and even then it wasn't anything. And Apocalypse should be time traveling and be like the Thanos of that universe if they were doing it right. Again, this isn't to just say here are all the bad things about the movies, because there's such good ones too. I really enjoyed X-Men First Class. I like that we were going back and they were able to pull it off a little bit better, where we get to see a younger Beast and Cyclops and Jean Grey, and they're tackling in and tapping into that younger audience, right? You still get the older characters of having Mystique around, and you are still having the relationship between Magneto and Xavier, but they're younger selves. So you were playing a little bit more, and I felt like they tried to really capture the dynamic of what the issues that the X-Men go through in terms of like civil rights movements and racism and discrimination. And I felt like they did a pretty good job when it came to that. So when they hit that movie, I enjoyed it. And then even when they went into Days of Future Past, I mean, I like the intro fight sequence, the future one, where you have all the teleportation, you have the Sentinels. There is a lot of tense and intensity going on there, and anxiety when you're watching these Sentinels come in that are way in the future. You can't kill them, and they're gonna take out everybody, and you have Magneto and Xavier and Storm and Bishop, and you're getting a taste of like all these X-Men, but unfortunately you don't have the buy-in with the characters like Bishop, where you haven't had 5 movies to care about him. So it should mean as much as, I don't know, Hawkeye passing away in MCU. No, that's a bad example. Everyone wants Hawkeye to die. Never mind. Vision, right? Vision's a fan favorite out there. It needs to have weight to it if they're going to kill off a character, like they do with Cyclops. And I think they tried to do that in the X-Men movies when they did get rid of him, but it didn't make much sense to me. I'm like, why would you give the leader of the X-Men gone and then trying to rewrite everything? And then you have to wait multiple movies to get Days of Future Past and First Class to actually get Cyclops back into it. And it's not really the same or what you're really looking for, in my opinion. And like Tyler writes in as well and just says like, I enjoyed Days of Future Past, even though it's a little convoluted. And even Josh says too, like even without seeing the Wolverine, that movie that we got, he feels like Days of Future Past and Logan are what everyone points to as the standouts. And it's, yeah, they're standouts, guys, like for what we were able to get. And we should have been able to get a tighter universe and a tighter story franchise and storylines to go through that, where you didn't need to necessarily blow it up with multiple characters. And this is what I feel like was always the issues once they started building out with like the Spider-Man Raimi movies, is that you start getting way more characters or villains added in and blow it up even more, add more. And it's the feeling, or maybe it's the idea that the quantity of getting all of these characters on screen is what's going to drive viewers and drive audiences to care a little bit more. If we just splash in Pyro and we splash in Mystique some more and we give these characters more time. And that's not necessarily what people were looking for. We have the same problems when we have the old Batman movies, right? Is that there's the argument that there's too many villains that get introduced and people feel like it gets watered down. What do you do when you have Sandman and Green Goblin mixed in with Venom all in one movie, and you're left thinking, well, these could all be standalone films. Why are you trying to jam so many bad guys into one Spider-Man movie, or having 3 or 4 villains in one single Batman movie? It can be too much if it's not done right, because you only have about 2 hours of screen time. And that's where I feel the issue is when you look at these X-Men movies, where X-Men as a universe itself in comic books is you have such a vast array of characters and teams and factions to play with and kind of pull out of the bucket. And obviously you want to have core pieces, core characters of, you know, Xavier, Magneto, Mystique, Wolverine. If that's kind of your lineup of main actors, characters that you want to focus on for these films, then so be it. That's cool. But you gotta get people invested in the secondary characters too. We can have those Wolverine movies or those Logan movies and really enjoy them for what they are, because we want that character to really be successful and we can identify really well with them. But we also need other characters to really be able to shine and have more depth. Looking at Cyclops, why can't we get Gambit in there, or bring in Jubilee, which would be perfect nowadays, based on the audience, and let that character really shine through. Go for more of an adult theme too if you want to do stronger storylines of having Rogue and Gambit's relationship, Storm and Wolverine in Age of Apocalypse. Way more to be able to play with. Go down the path really hard of the love triangle between Wolverine and Jean and Cyclops. Maybe try something creative and different that you could do with that triangle, other than Jean having affection for both, but ultimately picking Scott. We could have done way more with these movies, and that's the unfortunate thing. And the good news is that we actually get to have them try again and start anew when it comes into the MCU. And I'm curious what you guys think of when we will get them in the MCU. We know what this wave of films is going to look like, but do you think we're going to get them maybe in the second wave, or do you think that we're going to get drops and little hints of this in the next 2 to 3 or 5 years, where they start dropping in maybe Magneto a little bit or Wolverine? I personally think that they might actually go with Magneto. And I feel this way because we have the WandaVision trailer that just launched. By the way, we did a recap of the WandaVision trailer. That's a plug that I'm putting in there for you. But again, Wanda, Scarlet Witch, is the daughter of Magneto. You can't tell me that they don't want to kind of drive that, because as we have had Wanda in these MCU movies, people care a lot more about this character. And with the Disney show coming out this fall, people are going to hopefully buy into that character even more and care even more, so that you could bring in Magneto or the idea of him and bring him into the fold within the MCU, which can then bring in the X-Men. I don't know. There's 1,000 ways you do it. You could keep all those universes totally separate under the umbrella of Marvel. There's a ton that they could do there. Anyways, guys, that wraps it up for Free For All Friday. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really just want to be able to take some time today to be able to just talk kind of overall about the X-Men movies. We're finishing off our whole month of September with all things Marvel and MCU, the Marvel Avengers video game. We've had covers all September long, and it's been a ton of fun. And we're gonna wrap up next week by unboxing one of our figures. We're gonna finish things off with Peter Parker from the Retro series lineup. He's hiding in on the shelves too, if you can pick him out. So we're gonna talk Peter Parker, and we're gonna do a final ranking for the month next Tuesday on Top Shelf Tuesday. Excited to be able to go through that with you guys. But I am really excited because as a longtime Marvel fan, a lifelong X-Men fan, from the cartoons that you guys have seen all the way up until now with the movies and watching those films, I care a lot, and I care a lot about the characters, and I want to see it do well and be very successful. So the positive note to end on is that we will probably get that when it's going to be in the hands of Marvel Studios and get really what we've been after. The downside and the bad news is I am so because I ordered the Xbox Series X and I didn't tell my wife. So it was good to see you. I'm gonna go now and probably get my ass handed to me. Thanks for watching. As always, thanks guys for assembling with us. See ya.